You may remember towards the beginning of the year that I did a crime spree build for Link in Payday 2 as my first video for 2023. A fairly weird build, but it actually seemed to hold a potent amount of power, and since I deemed that there were other characters in Smash that are possible within the bounds of Payday 2's functionality, I decided to try my hand at another crime spree run as a Smash character. In this case, we'll be journeying through DC as Castlevania's notorious vampire killer, Simon Belmont. If you watched that first video I mentioned earlier, then the rules of engagement for this are straightforward and don't differ too much from when Link tried his hand at a crime spree. The objective is to get as far as possible within crime spree using the Belmont build. We are only allowed to utilize weapons that either the character uses in Smash or within the walls of their home series. Nothing else will be permitted to use. AI crewmates will be allowed, even if Anachronism wouldn't allow it. We can only reroll once permission select if our selection of potential heists aren't up to fancy, and as per expectations, we are only allowed 3 failures. Once the third stock is used up, that's the end of the crime spree. Before we get the show on the road, I'd like to take this time to thank you all for helping me reach 1,000 subscribers, which was my New Year's resolution going into 2023. That being said, 94% of the people who keep coming back to view my content are not subscribed, so I'd appreciate if you did just that if you're part of said 94%. Me reaching that 1k milestone is just the beginning of what I hope to be something big, and hopefully with your help we'll reach even more milestones before the year is up. 2,000, 5,000, 10,000? Who knows? Anyway, it's time to kit up as we take the fight to Dracula himself. Because of the lack of medieval-era garbs and Dracula masks, our Belmont cosplay game is fairly weak, but we can just make do with what we've got. Besides, what's really important is the build we're going to use, and things are a bit different compared to last time. In this case, primary and secondary weapons don't really matter all too much, seeing as how we're not going to be using them to damage anyone. For best results, I recommend low concealment weapons such as the light crossbow, as well as the pistol crossbow, the only secondary in the game with both good concealment values and non-renewable ammo in the explosive bolts, as well as one of the barrel mods, the camo grip, and a concealment boost if you deem it necessary. Our melee weapon will be the chain whip. It's certainly no vampire killer, but it's part of the max damage melee contingent, so it will have to make do when it counts, and will help boost it along with the fugitive skills that increase melee effectiveness. For throwables, we have a few options that are legal for Simon or Richter Belmont to use. We can utilize the throwing knives to represent daggers, throwing axes to represent the axe, and Molotov cocktails to represent holy water. Either way, these will be our main method of attacking, so choosing them well based on Heist will be important. For the equipment, we'll be using the recently added Ordnance Bag. While it didn't exactly set the world on fire when it was revealed, it will certainly find a way to be useful in a build like this, especially if we're utilizing Molotovs, which we can't renew naturally. Our armor of choice will be the Ballistic Vest, to allow ourselves some protection while still having good mobility. And for the perk deck, we'll be using Muscle, to tap into a large health pool that will allow us to survive for longer in intense situations. Skills here are mainly going to help with survivability and melee on this occasion, meaning a bit of an unorthodox setup compared to most other builds we usually use. In Mastermind, we only have Forced Friendship in the Controller branch for better cable ties. In Enforcer, we have Underdog Aced in the Shotgunner branch, and Resilience Aced, Transporter Basic, and Die Hard Bullseye and Shock and Awe all aced in the Tank branch. In addition to the hauling for bags, Bullseye will allow for armored regeneration through knives or axes dealing headshots, which can be useful for armor gating. And with Shock and Awe, we can reliably deal with shields, seeing as how we don't have a dedicated weapon for dealing with them otherwise. In Technician, I picked up Hardware Expert as well as Drill Sergeant and Kickstarter aced in the Breacher branch. Drill's skills are always handy, and I never really invested into Kickstarter aced much until tampering with this build. And honestly, it's kind of an underrated skill. It can certainly help cut down on waiting for drill repairs if your luck is good enough, and it can be a lifesaver when you least expect it to be. Technology isn't a Belmont forte, but let's just assume Simon and Richter are idiot savants when it comes to this sort of thing and manage to somehow bumble their way through any technological situations they may find themselves in. In Ghost, I picked up Chameleon and Sixth Sense Aced, as well as Cleaner Basic in the Shinobi branch, Duck and Cover, Parkour and Inner Pockets Basic in the Artful Dodger branch, and Second Wind, Optical Illusions and High Value Target Basic, as well as Low Blow Aced in the Silent Killer branch. With our setup, we have a base concealment value of 13. Not completely optimal, but more than enough for stealth and for maximum crit chance. And in Fugitive, I picked up 9 lives and Feign Death Aced in the Revenant branch, and Martial Arts and Pumping Iron Aced, Bloodthirst and Berserker Basic, and Counter-Strike Aced in the Brawler branch. Making the Chain Whip as effective as possible is important for a build like this, and being able to revive on the spot could prove useful in the right situations. So, that's all been taken care of. All that's left now is to go on to that crime spree run. It's time to stick it to Dracula and his army of monsters. After all, he doesn't belong in this world. With my vampire killing tools prepped and ready, it was time to begin a crime spree, and the age-old question is just where to start. The choices at the beginning were fairly interesting, but I eventually decided to tackle framing for a Dame 3 first, seeing as how this is a fairly competent, if a bit unorthodox, stealth build. The item gathering part went off without a hitch, getting them all in just over a minute, and the computer was accessed with ease despite Simon never seeing a computer in his life. But then came the first bump of several in the road. The vault was in the epicenter, or as all Payday 2 veterans such as myself would refer to it, the worst possible place for the vault to be. Not only would it be risky to open, but killing any guard that spots the open bookshelf would be risky as well due to how open the main room is. My strat for this would be to ferry the bags through the shortcut chute one at a time and then deposit them in the closet where I put this medic bag in the event of this heist going loud. The second bag was detected by this guard who got the honor of being the first axe kill of the run, and I nearly got caught out by a classic snowball effect when this guard spotted me answering a pager, but another swift and precise axe throw got the better of him. Then, as I was nearly done ferrying all of the bags down, a fourth guard caught me on the stairwell, which meant that there'd soon be a roaming guard with no flashlight that could catch me out. So I'd need to be careful. Despite this, I was surprisingly lucky by the end, as the epicenter remained suspiciously empty, allowing me to get all of the coke bags into the vault and letting me slip out after over 16 minutes of torture. That's just how bad the epicenter vault is. If you get it in a run outside of Crime Spree, it's effectively a restart condition. With that done, it was time for the tried and true search mission. After expending my bolts so that I don't run afoul of tasers later and break my own rules, I discovered that you can apparently use shape charges on these bridges, presumably to prevent entry from those angles. I definitely never knew about that, and I wonder how many other players even knew this was here. That discovery aside, this was a fairly routine mission, allowing me to showcase the power of the axe throwable and effectively carry out the heist the same way the average online Belmont would, with plenty of neutral Bs. With muscle, I could weather some pretty hefty resistance, and honestly, the build only really has 2 key weaknesses: tasers and snipers. If a taser gets you, you don't have any option to attack them with, forcing you to wait for teammates to save you. And snipers are usually too far away for throwables to have any meaningful effect. Regardless, I managed to axe this taser so hard that he flat out disappeared, and eventually managed to leave with the server in tow and many dead monsters in my wake. Next up was the Bomb Dockyard, a heist that I don't particularly mind in stealth. Unfortunately, after a promising opening, this civilian got alerted right in the line of sight of a camera, forcing the mission to loud. Not ideal, especially with the sniper coverage that would inevitably arrive. But mitigating this is that I was able to find the manifest while waiting for the C4, which would at least prevent a guessing game. After evading the sniper fire, I set the C4 on the gate and ran to the computer area to begin that objective. And it was here that I ran into probably one of the most amusing glitches I've ever experienced in Payday 2. Sydney, for whatever reason, was continuously going between being up and being down on a constant loop nearby to the left-hand side of the dock gate. Presumably because of her being in proximity of ground that wasn't there anymore. She was pretty much permanently incapacitated, and Clover was constantly trying in vain to get her back up. But she just keeps cycling between life and death repeatedly for the rest of the mission, likely thinking, what a horrible night to have a curse. In all of my years of playing this game, I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like this before. With Sydney trapped in an infinite and Clover stuck on nanny duty, it was basically up to me and Duke to defend the power boxes and complete the heist. But I guess Sydney's unique situation was drawing a lot of cop attention, as the heat around the power boxes was pretty much minimal, only going down a couple of times before the boat was released. Despite the pressure I came under towards the end, thanks to that sniper, I was able to beat the heat and escape on the boat with the bomb parts, and also freeing Sydney from her hardcore sit-ups. Next up on the agenda was Aftershock, a fairly routine mission on the surface. After one-shotting this bulldozer with a critted throwing knife, I was able to get both trucks open and threw the saves down onto the streets below. I needed to complete a cross-country run to get the C4 I needed, and then got the saves loaded onto the truck and into the construction yard. With said yard being too hot to handle with just some knives and a chain link, I decided in this one not to bother with dealing with the snipers myself, as no angle would get me a good path to knife them on the overpass. Either way, it was eventually simple enough, and I was able to get out, though not before having a close shave as I got into the truck. Next venture was the yacht heist, one that can be tricky if you don't know how to deal with it, not helped by me being caught out early on and needing to waste a pager. Despite the setback, I was able to get the lifeboat and aquarium moneybags easily enough, and the Room 101 moneybags soon followed. It was the green food cart that kept eluding me, however, and my search for it nearly created the mother of all blunders when this guard spotted me in the dining hall. Though thankfully, the other guard in the back was ignorant enough to not notice what was going on. And then I got caught by another guard soon after, making me worried I was falling victim to the classic stealth domino effect. It wasn't until I returned to the aquarium area where I found the green food cart, just sitting there having been eluded in plain sight when I passed through earlier. Wow, that was pretty embarrassing. I guess Belmonts aren't exactly good with perception. Either way, that was effectively the hard part over, as I was able to do the rest with ease. I did admittedly get caught by both guards in the server area, but by the time the alarm was raised, I was already set to leave with McKendrick's codes tucked away under my arm. To sunny Florida was next with Counterfeit, though sadly I couldn't utilize my double Bronco Cop strat that I developed in the Link run. No matter though, as I was able to make a typical romp through this heist with little worry. It's just as well Bullseye, Bloodthirst, and Low Blow work with throwables like the knives, because I feel as though this run would be nowhere near as possible without that aspect. Despite the heist trying to throw one last curveball with a red double cloaker in the sewers, I was able to deal with things easily and get out with not a care in the world. First World Bank was my next choice, and boy, if there was ever a situation where pretty much everything went wrong, this was it. It started with me getting the manager's keycard before getting caught out by these two civvies, who then got caught by this guard in line of a camera, forcing the heist to go loud. Then these snipers showed up and made things infinitely harder. I lost so many downs and throwing axes just trying to get rid of this one here. I even had to get a medic bag to restore my downs after going grey. That was just how much that was being thrown at me in this one. Despite everything, I was dragged kicking and screaming to the vault, where I managed to get both cans of thermite and pour them out. The first bulldozer in the vault brought me down to my last down again, before Feign Death allowed me to get revenge and stick axes into his face, which I repeated for the second. The third dozer, though, I might have to begrudgingly accept as a tactical genius, as he tanked all three of my axes, and then ran away to deprive me of my primary means of attack. With that, I decided to deliberately go into custody to just refresh my downs quickly. Eventually, I got the bags into the vent, and even went for round 2 on that pesky bulldozer that managed to elude me earlier. only for him to down me yet again and run off with more axes embedded into him. You win this round, Death. Afterwards, I made the run down to the garage, loaded the bags, and made it out, despite the game's attempts to kill me again. After that fiasco, I figured it was best to call it a day, just to recover after how badly that went. Feeling refreshed after a break, I picked up where I left off with engine problem. If there were to be any problems on this heist, they weren't going to come from the 17th century. They'd be coming from the 21st century. Yeah. I don't know what force possessed me to break that window, but it alerted 2 guards and caused my stealth run to end, even in spite of my best efforts to salvage it. To make matters worse, the info from the clipboards insinuated that it'd be at the toss-up between engines 7 and 10. So after I had my attempt to axe this dozer foiled by his posse batting me around before getting revenge for the first world bank run, I made my way into the lab, grabbed both engines and made my way to the airstrip. I even decided to refresh my downs after I went grey, though not before I clipped this sniper with an axe. Mercifully, the game decided that engine 7 was correct, meaning I'd get to escape a little earlier than I anticipated. Probably for the best, really. With that came interception, a heist that should really be straightforward. Unfortunately, my AI crewmates had other ideas, deciding to get caught up in a taser cloak or ambush and forcing me to go back and get them, going down in the process. The biker boss didn't give me too much grief, mainly due to me being able to replenish my axes, but the return lap proved to be the hardest challenge, as even my beefy muscle build proved to be inferior to the fire I was taking. Going grey 45 meters from freedom, I thought this would be my first fail of the run, but thankfully, a last second inspired proved to be the deciding factor, giving me the window needed to secure the BCI helmet and get off of the train. After that, it was time for breaking feds. One that I don't tend to do in these crime spree runs, and for good reason. It's pretty badly balanced. Still, I decided to give it a run, and it went fairly decently until I decided that the best way to keep this sieve from detection was to knife this camera. Then, as I answered a pager, a guard spotted the handiwork, and my knife was just a split second too late before the alarm sounded. That was a pretty dismal way to get the first failure of the run. Undeterred, I decided to try again, and boy was this a massive error in judgment. Finding the laptop was easy enough, even if I had to get rid of this Mr. Rogers lookalike to get to it reliably. But this is why I don't like breaking feds. The guard traffic in the first area is ridiculously high, making getting through this area without killing a guard all but impossible. After taking longer in the first area than I would reasonably like to, I found Garrett's office and cut the power boxes. But since he decided to only go 10 feet away from his office, I decided getting the code then and there was a no-go. I was having to utilize all of my pages, and I even took out the camera guy just to try and stand a chance on this one. But after the second attempt to get Garrett out of his office, I was spotted by a 5th guard thanks to the old classic blind spot, meaning I had lost 2 stocks on breaking feds alone. Suffice to say, my opinion of this heist is not going to improve anytime soon. Feeling particularly cheesed off at breaking feds, I decided to take the game's forced change of scenery at face value and tackle First World Bank again. This time stealthing it as much as I could reasonably do to avoid those pesky snipers. Thankfully, the manager was found fast and the power boxes disabled soon after. Despite never seeing this weird computer device in 1691, our trusty Belmont was able to find the code before long and get into the vault area. And then I got immediately caught out. Drat. Oh well, at least the stressful part of dealing with snipers was skipped, so I could just focus on the thermite burning, grabbing the loot, and escaping again. This time with a modicum more grace than the first time around. I decided to go cross some international borders at this point and enter Mexico for the Breakfast in Tijuana mission. A heist that I still don't own to this day. At least it's not the only one. I'll probably deal with that some other time. Despite a good attempt to do this as quietly as possible, one civ got alerted at just the wrong time and alerted everyone in the police department. You could tell that I was getting frustrated at the stealth attempts being botched when I knifed that innocent Civ for causing those chain of events in the first place. I was able to brute force the evidence burning despite the fact that even low-level crime spree was starting to tear my muscle build to shreds at this point. And the defense of the hacking device went about as smoothly as driving on a road from the time of Dracula himself. With Harudin freed and his keys eventually found, I had to hold my ground in the car park until the helicopter arrived. I went down outside next to the car while trying to attach the hooks, and my teammates decided to pull the same trick on my Belmont that they did to Link and just leave me there to bleed out. That's no way to roll with the Belmont clan. At least they had the decency to do it while the assault was down, meaning I could just be freed, get the remaining hooks in place, and escape in short order. Back over to the US of A came the FBI server mission, and I could tell it was going to be just one of those nights when this guard came through the door I just picked open, giving me the idea to just give him what he deserved for being a nuisance. Beyond that, the process of this heist was straightforward, even getting mileage out of Kickstarter aced, and being able to haul the server out on my back with little to no worries. Onward to bank heist to commemorate reaching the 100 mark, I decided to rock the boat even more than I already have been and bring along Molotovs for the first time. In theory, in a civilian-dense map like this, it should have been a complete disaster. But with the vault in the back of the bank, throwing multiple cocktails through multiple choke points, especially the middle part here, made this heist surprisingly easy, and I escaped this with a single bag of money in tow. Good work, Mollies. Clearly feeling better about the madness of breaking feds, I decided to try my hand at Swing Vote. Once I got the camera guy out of the way, 5 out of 6 machines were hacked with relative ease, but getting to find a 6th proved to be a challenge. I ended up having to kill a guard that spotted me, and incidentally, I found the last machine I needed there. Despite said machine causing a massive domino effect, the stealth mechanics meant that I had bought myself just enough time to let the hack complete, meaning all I had to do was make a mad dash for the van and the run was salvaged. Just. After re-rolling my mission selection, I decided to go for another stint on the framing job. This time, the vault was in a much more preferable position by the office, meaning getting the bags down would not be as strenuous. The heist itself, however, would not be so nice, as I lost 3 pages in little over a minute without having even found all the items for the hack, making things tricky to say the least. Despite the level of peril involved, I was able to salvage things and get down to the vault and planted all 8 bags in there. All that was left was to get the computer and I'd be out. Or at least I would have been if this guard hadn't decided to see me right in front of a camera, rendering all of my previous efforts for nothing. Now I was having to suffer through God knows how long of the loud variant of this heist. The fact that one of the power boxes sat on the roof did not make this any easier. I was having to rely on the power of my Molotovs just to make things even remotely simple on my end. After nearly 20 minutes of suffering through constant swarms of powerful enemies shutting off power boxes while I was eventually left with nothing more than my budget vampire killer and some pain in the neck AI for company, I was eventually able to drag myself out of this heist. Good mood completely soured. This clearly meant that the best way to get revenge was to risk everything in Shadow Raid. I was able to find 4 bags early on inside the main building's ground floor, and another 4 in the warehouse itself. Although one of which was an artifact that led me running into a civvy that I just wasn't prepared to risk getting seen with only 1 fail remaining. With the helicopter dropping off more guards, I'd have to employ a similar strat here that I did as Link. Drop off the 8 I recovered, get 1 money bag from a container in the courtyard, secure that and get out. Luckily, it didn't take much searching to find what I was after, allowing me to slip out with relative ease. The fact that I decided to tackle Car Shop next in spite of the risk involved just reinforced the idea that my build seemed better suited for stealth than for loud at this point. After making my way in via the rooftop, the manager was captured with little difficulty. The hack then went off without a hitch, C4 planted, and Simon managed to make his way out with the Falco Genie, which he somehow managed to drive like a pro despite the car being far more high-tech than anything he's had to deal with. The next destination was a transport job on the underpass, which would allow me to get back in the groove of loud and throwing axes again, as a Belmont player would. Unfortunately though, me getting murked by these beat cops basically set the tone for what was to come. The damage that was coming in was proving too much, even for the buffed health pool that Muscle offers, and I was going down to anything and everything. Not helping was feigned death, which was actually being a nuisance, causing me to be down to this dozer twice. Despite everything, I was able to get 5 bags of gold and haul them to the escape van, bruised and beaten by the increasingly hard assaults. Clearly, I needed something to bring my mood up again, and another run through the search would hopefully provide that. Unfortunately, it wasn't proving to be much fun. A sniper spawned on the 2nd floor made the encryption task needlessly hard, the treks to and from the operations room was being nightmarish with how much damage everyone was doing to me, and I went into custody at the server objective, though thankfully outside of an assault, meaning I could just pop back in. After a relentless 20 minutes, I was able to get out of the FBI headquarters with the master server back in my possession, and a thought in my head. Where to go from here? The answer to that was that I decided that the only thing to do was to reroll my heist selection, and that led me to the yacht heist once again. Things went off to a horrible start as I alerted this couple who I needed to move, who in turn alerted this guard. Then a second guard was alerted by me answering the first guard's pager, leaving me with only one pager without having even found the laptop yet. My best bet would be simply to brute force this heist to the best of my ability, starting from the top of the boat and going down. This then got me spotted by a guard that I'm pretty sure I never even saw when I entered the room, leaving me with no contingencies. Despite my best efforts to salvage this run, I was finally caught by a 4th guard who even decided to rub salt into the wound by firing his gun and alerting the entire boat to the fact that a Belmont had boarded a Soma cruise ship. A pretty disappointing end to this crime spree challenge. With that, the Belmont crime spree challenge ends at rank 148. Not terribly bad considering I only had a piece of chain and some throwables to carry me through, but I know that it could have gone much better. But after the string of luck I had in this run, I figured it wasn't worth trying to push it. Do I recommend this build at all? Well, I think it's obvious. Unless you're planning to just mess around, the answer's a resounding no. With that said, thank you for watching to the end, throw us a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more content in the future, and I'll see you on whatever I do next. Take care now.